Hi, everyone, and welcome to A Word with Kellie Scott Reed. We're here with Douglas Bales, author of Maximum Taxi, a fictionalized version of something he's actually lived. I can't wait to talk about this with you. Welcome to our little club here at the Rough and Yaw Press.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So you're coming to us from Chattanooga area, Tennessee.
Yes. Yep.
Were you born and raised there? Is that where you're from originally?
Yeah, I was born in Chattanooga, and grew up here. And in my later years, I traveled around a lot. I'm a musician also, so I've traveled all over the U.S. and Mexico and France. And for a few years, like from, I guess it was 2018 to about 2022, I lived in Mississippi, like North Mississippi in the Delta, little town called Clarksdale. But yeah, I moved back here a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago. You always end up coming back home at some point,
Or you never leave like me. I just stay in the same spot.
Right.
I boringly stay in the same spot. So yes, I have read a little bit of your book that you so kindly sent over. Tell us a little bit about your concept. And you're with Anxiety Press, right? Is that
Yes.
who released the
Yeah,
book?
Cody Sexton at Anxiety Press signed it. Guess it was earlier this year. It was back around February. He signed it, and we got it out like right around end of May, 1st of June. But yeah, it's on Anxiety Press, which they're great people. I love them.
Absolutely.
Cody, really cool
Paige,
people to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the story. How did it come about?
Well, in 2013, I was working with a friend of mine, and we were just we were in a band together, and we kind of were doing just kind of catch can jobs. We were doing lawn mowing and raking leaves and scrap metal, like anything we could do to make a buck. And I ended up just tearing my back up. Like I had a collapsed vertebrae. So I had to find a job where I could sit down. The only time I wasn't in total pain was when I was sitting. And not being of any sort of real education where I could get a desk job or something like that, I wound up driving a taxi cab. And I did that for about 3 years. And that's where all the stories come from. Like most of it, probably 75% of that book is based in fact, and then I jazzed it up a little bit, fictionalized it, changed the names of the businesses, But yeah, it was a real thing. That's what I did for a little over 3 years, was drive a taxi in Chattanooga.
There were times when I was reading your stories where I was actually nervous for you.
It's
terrifying.
It's a strange job, I mean, you're pretty well on your own, and you got to kind of play it by ear sometimes. And that's one thing the cab company, I think I even mentioned it in the book at some point, but that's one thing the cab company always liked about me was I'd go anywhere in the city. Like there are some drivers that refuse to go to certain neighborhoods, but yeah, I'd go anywhere because I've always been kind of, even since I was like a kid, especially a teenager, I was always sort of drawn to the darker side of things, like, like slimy bars and scary neighborhoods, and, grew up going to punk shows and stuff. So I was always kind of drawn to sort of that darker side of life that a lot of people, your average person is a little bit afraid of. But I always just looked at it as A, an adventure, and B, a learning experience. And
so
see if you can get out with your skin,
Yeah, we have that in common. I used to go to, we had these bars in Rochester, one on top, it was Idols and Scrap. So one was the punk bar, one was the new wave bar. And when I was like
Right.
14, I lived in the city. So I would take a bus down to these awesome shows. Um, Wendy O is from Rochester. So we would see her in those bars
Yeah.
and just like really cool. I get that. And that's what I liked about your book is that they were honest stories,
Yeah.
real, you could tell. And this exists, it's reality. It's dark or not, it is reality. And you were living
Right.
it and you were in it. So so you're a drummer in the band and you
Yes.
write
Yeah.
music too,
Yeah.
correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
What
And
was that
occasionally
transition like?
I front for a band too, but that's only every once in a while. I'll get behind the microphone and sing, you know.
That's awesome. And was it a big transition for you to write from, songwriting to a full length novel, or did you write long form before?
Well, I've always, at least since I was a teenager, like my later teens, I've always written. Um, and mostly I started out writing poetry, you know, like I'd write these poems. I've got stacks of notebooks and about half of it's garbage, at least. But yeah, I started, I guess, when I was maybe, I don't know, 19 or 20. I started trying to write short stories. And that kind of led into, more and more writing, but it's always been in me, I think. And once I got the job driving the taxi, I was like, man, this is so strange. People need to people need to hear what this is like, and I mean, you've got other, of course, the great film by Martin Scorsese, Taxi Driver. Um, that was a little bit of an influence on me, and sometimes it was a bit surreal when I was driving late at night and had the jazz radio on and it's raining. I was like, whoa.
I'm living a Scorsese film.
Yes. Wow, man. But
Yeah, you have a cool life. I'll tell you, drummer,
it
lead singer in a band, and yeah, a
it's
cool.
been interesting. I don't know if it's cool or not, but it's been interesting.
I think it is. Did you have any literary heroes growing up, or anybody that you took your
Oh
writing?
yeah, man, a lot. When I was a little kid, when I was about, I guess, 9 or 10, like my mother turned me on to reading at a early age. I always loved books. But when I was around 9 or 10 or 11, probably all those years, my mom was a like an instructor for the Weight Watchers company, that used to be around. I guess they may still be around. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But she would go to do her classes on Saturdays, and right next to the little office where they would do the classes was the public library. So I would just go hang out at the library for like 3 or 4 hours every Saturday. And I would sit there and read, and then I'd check out books. And, I've always been a big reader, like always. But the main ones, actually Tolkien was a big one when I was a kid. I was
Mm-hmm.
like I got turned on to that whole thing ages before any of the movies were made.
Yeah.
Like this is
Yeah.
I'm talking, this was in like the 70s, like mid 70s, So I got turned on to that, and then I got turned on to Steinbeck, which is one of my favorites. Like John Steinbeck, I still love his stuff. Like I still go
Agreed.
back and reread his stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've always read a lot of history. I'm kind of a history buff weirdo, but I've got hundreds of books on history, especially military history.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, Steinbeck was always a big one. And then in my later teens, like 17, 18, 19, my older brother, I've got an older brother, Mike. He turned me on to William Faulkner and James Joyce. So started reading those guys, which was just, especially Faulkner is, God, I love that guy. and, then, and then after that, I got into like some more beat sort of stuff like Kerouac and Gregory Corso, John Fonte. Charles Bukowski is a huge hero of mine.
Yeah.
Nelson Ogren's another. I read way more than I write.
Well, yeah. Do you think you have to be a prolific reader to be a writer?
I think it certainly helps. I think that definitely helps. Like, well, one of my musical heroes is Joe Strummer, and he had a quote one time that's always stuck with me. He said, "Nothing in, nothing out." Meaning, if you don't have the input, you're not going to have the output. So
that's super interesting. We have a game we play at my house. My son's a musician, and so he'll write songs and play them for us. And my husband and I call the game Find the Influence. Like, who does that sound like to you?
Oh, okay. Man, that's cool.
It's fun. That's like, cool. Oh, that sounded a little Tom Petty. That sounded a little Clash. That sounded a little you can hear the influences. So we call it Find the Influence. Awesome. But again, that's awesome. Like you said, like when you read a lot or you intake a lot of music, you pick up ideas whether you realize it or not. Like,
right.
Not even intending the influence, but it's there somehow.
Exactly. And even to me, just walking around the streets or going to an art gallery or anything, like everything influences you whether you know it or not. Like everything in your world is an influence whether you realize it or not. But as far as the reading and writing thing goes, I think it's extremely important to read if you want to write, and not saying that I'm going to write like this person, or you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like you don't necessarily want to emulate someone, but at the same point, that stuff gets in your brain and it kind of comes through sometimes, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
It does. It absolutely does.
It does to me.
I'm a 70s person too. I grew up in the 70s. So I feel you when you say these things weren't in movie form or anything yet. And I was thinking about that in regards to influences in your book. When you were writing Maximum Taxi, did you have a voice? Was it your voice in mind, or did you take on a character when you wrote?
No, it was totally me. Okay. I've had some of my friends that have known me for a long time that have read the book say, "Man, I can hear your voice when I'm reading this."
Yeah.
Which to me is very cool. It's like, it's a great compliment, But no, it was, I just, and I think I may have learned that from the Bukowski and the Kerouac in particular, and maybe Hunter Thompson as well. You just write it like you would, like if you and I were sitting here and I was telling you a story, that's how you write it, rather than trying to, I mean, I wish I could write like Faulkner, but it'd come out ridiculous if I tried, I mean, but no, I think it's important to have your own voice. And of course, when you're writing dialogue, your characters, you have to kind of be almost like a little bit of an actor in your mind. And kind of put yourself in that person's shoes, to write the dialogue. At least that's how I approach it.
Was there one character in the book, because they were all based on real people, Was there
Mm-hmm.
one that you enjoyed writing more than the other, and why would that be?
Man, I don't know. I had a lot of fun with a character called Skeet. He's in about halfway through somewhere, I think. And he was based on a real guy that was like a regular passenger of mine. And I love that dude. He was a really cool old guy, and I always had fun just hanging with him and talking with him, when I was giving him rides. Um, Other than that, there's a character called Summer that she pops up kind of throughout the book, you know. And she was based on actually a couple of different people, but mainly on one person. And I had fun with that one. I had a lot of fun writing that part because, you know, is you just have to read it and
Yeah.
you'll
No,
see
no.
what I mean about her. But um yeah, it was an interesting way to make a living for a while. Just the people you meet, it's you know, like I think at some point in the book I say it's everything from millionaires to $2 whores, and everything in between.
And when it comes to writing for you, do you have a process? Is it something that you do like at a certain time every day? Is it something that you have these moments where you go, okay, now I got to write, and it can be random, or is there a process for you?
Well, I try to write every day. But I'm not a very disciplined person. So, but sometimes when it hits you, you know it. And if I'm not at the computer or whatever, I'll grab a notebook and just write it out longhand. But yeah, I try to spend at least an hour or two every day. Like I'm working on a new book now, and some days I'll just sit there and I'll go back and revise some stuff, and then I'll like get a few paragraphs in and go, okay, maybe, yeah, okay, I'll look at this tomorrow. But I try to do at least an hour or two a day, although I'm not always successful at that. And some days I go, man, I'm taking the day off, you know?
It is a process. I don't know how, I am not the best. I'm not the most disciplined writer myself, and I
Right.
have a hard time sitting in general. So anyone who could sit in at all for an hour and write something, that's a success. That would be a success. I'm not disciplined in that regard. If inspiration strikes, I go for it, but it
Yeah.
has to strike. It has to strike
Yeah.
for me. Well,
Yeah. I
where
think it
can we
was,
find? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I was just going to say, I'd read a thing that Stephen King, he said that he'll write like 3 or 4 hours a day. And that just blows my mind, having that kind of discipline.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that's why the dude's probably got like 120 books published. I mean,
Yeah. He's
and well, and
gifted.
Bukowski was another one. He would write for 3-4 hours a day, and there again, he's got like hundreds of books published. So I guess it
Yeah. It's a
it pays
muscle.
off
It's a
if you can
muscle.
force yourself to do it.
Yeah. It's a muscle that you build. And I know that that's the case, like with all things. I mean, while writing is a mental process, it's a physical process as well.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to get something from here to here.
Yep.
So the more you build that muscle, the more it'll
Well,
flow.
a lot of people I don't think realize too how you know from the outside you're just sitting there typing or whatever, but it's it takes a toll, like a physical, like after I get done for an hour or two, I'm tired, I'm worn out, it's like people don't realize the physicality of it, like you're saying.
I was going to ask my last question was going to be, does writing energize or exhaust you? So I
A,
guess you
a
already
little of
answered
both, a little
yeah.
of both. it's a two-edged sword, you know. Like when you know you got something good, there's nothing that feels that great, you know. I mean, it's a great feeling when you know you finally got it right, you know. But at the same time, it'll wear you out, you know. It's work, you know.
And I'd like you to get out where you can find you, like on the internet, if you have a website.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's my website is just douglasbales.com. And then I'm on Facebook as Doug Bales, Instagram as Doug Bales, and Twitter as Doug Bales.
Okay, cool.
And I think I've got a thing on Goodreads, which I don't understand how that works, but
I know.
I think I've got a page on there. And of course, you can get the book on Amazon.
Right.
That's probably the easiest place to pick it up. But if you hit me up on any of my personal stuff, we can hook it up and do a Venmo or PayPal, and I'll send you a signed one, you know.
Oh, yay. Awesome.
And then it's at a few small bookshops around, like there's one in Chattanooga called Winder Binder Books, where you can pick up a copy, and Dunaway Books in St. Louis, Missouri, and the Hambone Gallery in Clarksdale, Mississippi are carrying them right now, and I'm trying to get them into a few more shops.
That's really exciting that there's independent bookshops.
Yes.
It's
yes.
so exciting. Yeah. I mean, we have a few in Rochester, but not as many as we used to have. And I miss them so much.
Oh,
so
man,
to hear that you have your stuff around is fantastic.
Yeah. I made the mistake a few months back. I was with a friend of mine, and she wanted to go to what is it? Books A Million, I think. Yeah, one of the big. I think that's what it was called. And it was just like, I was terrified, man. Yeah. It was like walking into a circus. Like they had a whole Starbucks coffee shop, and they had more crap than books.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it was just like, what is this place? She's like, it's a bookstore. I'm like, no, it ain't. This is not a bookstore.
Well, Douglas, I really appreciate you spending time with me this afternoon.
Yeah.
I can't wait till people get to read your book. It's great.
Yeah. I hope everybody in the world reads it. You know,
me too.
I'm pretty proud of it, and I really appreciate you having me on. A word, and or I guess I should say a word. So there's a question mark, right?
Like, can I have a word with you? That's kind of. It sounds very disciplinarian, but that's not what I need to be. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me on. I'm proud to be here, and it's great meeting you. And yeah, everybody read more books, man. Reading is fundamental. You know.
It absolutely is.
Exercise your brains, man.
Thanks so much, Douglas. Have a great day.
You're welcome, Kelly. Have a good afternoon.